Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast. I am your host, Keith Billick, and I'm so happy you're joining me. Hope you're having a great summer. I am busy as ever playing with my band Wilson Thicket, and every once in a while I even get around to making one of these episodes for your banjo listening pleasure, so I really appreciate you tuning in. Of course, I love all of my listeners, but some listeners do achieve that very important picker, that's the VIP status. And today's VIP supporter of the show is Eddie Hennessy. Eddie is actually a neighbor of mine. He is a resident of Ferndale, Michigan, which is also the place I call home. He's been taking lessons with my good buddy Davy Jones, which he discovered through the podcast. So I'm so happy to have a local guy that I am able to reach out to and thank. And it makes me feel good to know that I'm playing banjo matchmaker between students and teachers here too. So Eddie, thank you so much for your support. And for those of you who have not heard my spiel before, I do have a Patreon page, which is the best way to support the show if you do enjoy what you're hearing. That is patreon.com/banjopodcast. You can sign up to donate a few dollars per month, and you do receive bonus prizes in return. So once again, that's patreon.com/banjopodcast. Other ways to support the show, head over to banjopodcast.com to get your official Picky Fingers merchandise. That's the t-shirts, the hats, the stickers, and there's a sale going on right now of all discontinued colors on those shirts, as well as all small and extra small sizes. So I love people who are big fans of the show, but the smaller fans are getting the favoritism treatment here with this one. So banjopodcast.com, check out those shirts. You can also email the show. That's pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com. Today's featured guest is the one and only Ned Luberecki. Ned wears many banjo hats in the banjo world. He is a prominent educator. He is one of the bluegrass voices over on Sirius XM satellite radio, but many of us know him as the banjo player for the Becky Buller Band. In fact, this was almost a freshly picked episode to profile the Becky Buller Band's brand new album, Jubilee, which has been making waves on the charts and has received some much-deserved critical acclaim, in no small part due to Ned's expert banjo playing. So we discuss all about that album, which has a great story and some cool banjoistic things to know about it. But it has been almost 6 years since I interviewed Ned way back for episode 13, so I thought we should just do some other catching up. And the other big news in Ned's life is that he's being inducted to the Banjo Museum Hall of Fame this year. So congrats to Ned and the rest of the Becky Buller Band on your successful album release. Congrats to Ned on the Hall of Fame induction. And congrats to all of you listeners who get to hear Ned share his wisdom, which he did with me when we were both teaching at Midwest Banjo Camp recently. So put your hands together and welcome back to the podcast, Ned Luberecki. And we have the new theme music. Thank you so much. That was way easier than the last theme music I recorded.
Glad to oblige.
Yeah. Well, it's great to see you, Ned. I didn't actually even say hi to you. We've passed in the hallway a couple times here at Midwest Banjo Camp, and we're getting it started in style late night after some jams. And
late night after the jams when everybody's really fresh and at their best.
Yep. But I was just musing that I don't remember the episode number that you were on. I could find out real quick, but suffice to say it's been about 6 years.
Yeah, it's been a little while ago. I've not been to the camp since it's been in the new location. We're in Indiana now, which is a little closer than Michigan, I guess, for me.
For you, yeah. Not so much for...
Not for you,
yeah, exactly. So we have like multiple things to chat about, and maybe the one that's at the forefront of my mind because it's current news is like you have a new Becky Buller Band album that just came out, and it's a really interesting one. So I want to talk to you about it.
Yeah, it's fun, and I'll try to keep it banjo-centric as much as I can, but there is a story that goes to the album, and I'm sure if anybody has read anything about the album, well, first of all, yes, I play in the Becky Buller Band, and Becky is our leader, and Becky is one of the most prolific songwriters in bluegrass music. She's written songs for everybody, and she's written songs about all kinds of things, and this one, I think, is probably her most personal venture into songwriting. And what it really deals with is, like a lot of people that you might be surprised by from their, really gregarious and outgoing nature, a lot of times there's stuff hidden behind that. And Becky has always struggled a little bit with depression and anxiety. Especially when the pandemic hit, we had a few things really. I was with her through most of that, and I remember we had just recorded an album at that time, and it was supposed to be released, at the pandemic, and of course, nothing got released, and a couple of guys quit the band, and so there were all these things that happened, and all the gigs canceled, and of course, like everybody else, but she took it really hard, and she really went through something really dark, and once she started making her way out of this, she got back into writing, and she was commissioned by the Freshgrass Foundation that does the Freshgrass festivals in Arkansas and also in Massachusetts to write something for the festival. And she decided to go with the song cycle, and the song cycle is meant to be listened to as the album is recorded. It kind of tells a story through all of the songs, and there's some instrumental pieces and there's some songs. And so she brought this to us to learn as a piece, and it really struck all of us, not only how personal it was, but, it gave us a sort of a motivation to really take this very seriously as well, because, we didn't want to treat it lightly musically, so we all were involved in the arranging of it. And I know when it comes to the album, so two things came to my mind when we did it. One was to try to play it with all the respect that I could for the songs, trying to focus on the emotional content of the songs. But it was also, Becky made clear to us that when we were to perform it, well, actually she wrote it for the festival, and we hadn't thought about recording it, but it was meant to be performed all in one piece. It's about 35 or 40 minutes all in one section. And it goes from the key of B flat to G to A to F to C minor, eventually ends up in C major and back to A. And I wondered, how am I going to move capos through all of that, to get from one place to the other without disrupting and retuning and doing all that.
Of course.
So I kind of made the choice early on to just, let's see how everything lays on the banjo in just open position, and found out that it actually, all of the stuff was really accessible in all of those keys. And then I always think about that too, whenever you're playing something in a different key than just, open G, that it allows you to sound different. You're not just playing, not everything sounds like, you don't fall on your normal bag of licks. So that became kind of a fun part of the project for me, to be able to work out how to do all that. The most terrifying one was the really the darkest song on the record is called Alone, and it's the one that has the big extended improvised jam right in there, and it's all in C minor, So I thought, well, okay, now I have to figure out how to do a big improvised jam in C minor, and we did it. We pulled it off at the festival, and they allowed us to record it at their. We did it at the Bentonville, Arkansas Festival in the spring, and then we played their other festival up in Massachusetts where they have a recording studio. And we recorded it all live. So we just sat in a room looking at each other and did the whole thing there. And once again, when you're thinking about, okay, I've got to take this extended improvised solo and it's going to be recorded and it's in a key that I don't really know, where I am.
Yeah, you want to be as safe as possible. I'm so glad that you mentioned that it was recorded live, because that was one of the first things that I wanted to make sure I asked about it, because it absolutely has that sound. So you either actually recorded it live or were very adept at responding and listening carefully on the playback.
We rehearsed it a bunch so that, we wanted to be ready when we got in there. But Stephen Mogen is our producer for Dark Shadow Records, and Stephen usually records things at his studio there in Nashville. Mm-hmm. In this case, since we were going to another studio, he didn't know how he was going to bring any of his gear up there or what he was going to do. But it turned out that Dave Cinco, who does sound for Punch Brothers and is a brilliant recording engineer, he was already going to be there because he was recording Mr. Sun. Okay. And so he already had his box of microphones with him. And Steven said, hey, Sync, would you like to just go ahead and do this for me? And so he engineered the session, and that gave Steven the freedom to just be the producer. So he stood in the room with us and listened to us play it as it was going down. And then he could make suggestions, and we would just keep going over the songs until we would get the take that we wanted. I think there was probably a little editing done. They may have taken a couple takes, but we didn't do it to a click. We just played the songs as we felt them, and Becky sang them all live. The only thing not live, Aoife O'Donovan did her vocal part later, and the other harmony vocals were put on later, because the other part was they told us we had 2 days in the studio to do this, and then midway through the day on Friday, which was the last day, they said, oh, by the way, you have to be out of here by 5 o'clock.
Oh, my God. So a day and a half.
Yeah, so we were like, oh, well, let's get these last 2 songs done in a hurry then. So, yeah.
So to back you up, and maybe it's out of your realm to answer something like this, but you mentioned how these songs have a personal connection to Becky in response to just the experiences she had, but it's also the commission for the Fresh Grass. How did those overlap? Like, was there not a prompt on her, or how did she adapt her personal songs to being
this I think
present?
The way it came about was there wasn't any kind of prompt, and other people have done instrumental concertos and things like that for the festival, so it wasn't always Becky had even said that she knew that, I think Sierra Hull wrote a concerto, and Becky she said, I can't do that, so she was like, but a song cycle I can do. And at first, I think she was intimidated, like anybody would be. You're looking at a blank sheet of paper and going, okay, what happens next? Mm-hmm. But she had already written the title song, Jubilee, with Aoife O'Donovan.
A dusty sunbeam shivers in our January room, filled with resolutions, empty liquor box strewn. You take my hand, our youngest laughs, and grabs my legs. We so dance without a tune. The city screams but can't reach me. I'm listening for my Jubilee.
And the song is about being so busy and then needing a year of Jubilee, which the old biblical reference to a Jubilee was every 50 years you'd take a year of just relaxing. You had a time off, basically, is what it really meant. And she talked about how they written this song about wanting some time off, and then all of a sudden they got it. So that's part of the story, is you need the year of Jubilee, and then the time off comes and you hit a dark spot. So once she had that song, she'd already written that song with Aoife before the song cycle came about, and then she started putting the rest of that, became the inspiration for it, I think.
Yeah, cool. Now, just so I'm clear on terms here, what's a song cycle?
I'm not super clear on it myself, but I believe what it means, what it refers to is, instead of thinking of just here's a collection of songs for an album, or even here's a collection of songs for an album that have a theme, this is a collection of songs that are meant to be listened to in order. They tell a story as the songs go,
okay.
So here's the first song, don't listen to it out of order, and it's meant to be experienced in sequence, because there's not only a theme, but it's a story with a beginning, middle, and end. So the idea of the song cycle is that it does that. The cycle part of it, I don't know. It doesn't come back around to the beginning, so I don't know.
I mean, you and I are both rock fans. That's just a concept album.
It is a concept album. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I love how it's set up, and for the, I don't know what I would call it, our ADD culture, where people have trouble listening to anything for like more than a minute at a time. I encourage people to check it out, because how Ned described it, it might seem intimidating to listen to this whole thing straight through, but it's very short, digestible snippets. It's really kind of like an EP worth of songs, along with some instrumental interludes and segues, and it really keeps it interesting, and the songs are really good. So, and
it does bring me back, like you said, being rock fans or just going back to albums, going back to thinking about albums. I mean, that was a thing. That was a thing when listening to music was a deliberate act, when it wasn't just, download this one song or listen to this thing streaming and whatever the latest single is. It used to be you got
everything
an album
shuffle,
from your you got it, and you sat there by your record player and listened to it and read the liner notes and then flipped it over in time and then listened to it, and it was there was studying that was involved in that, and you got something more emotional out of it. And I'll confess, I'm as bad as anybody else now. I listen to most of the music I hear on the phone, but there is something about going back and listening to albums and thinking about the way they're put together like that. That's a bit of a lost art, I mean, there are still people doing it, but it's not, the focus nowadays is get a single out, get it played on the radio, use it up as much as you can, then get the next single out. It isn't, here's this piece of work, I want you to experience.
Yeah, this opus.
Right.
So let's get into the banjo stuff. Maybe you don't need to play the whole album, but you mentioned all these different keys. Maybe take us through how you approach some of these different keys, or show us some tricks that you developed that helps you weave through.
The first real tune on the album that we all play is conveniently, it's a fiddle tune that Becky wrote. It's called Kismet. It's in G, so that was pretty handy. That one worked out just great. And like anytime I try to learn how to play a fiddle tune, and I've probably taken the same progression as a lot of banjo players did. I started off by taking lessons, and I learned how to play really Scruggs style first, and then started dipping into melodic style things. And when I started learning melodic style tunes, Tony Trishka's book, of course, Melodic Banjo was that was step number one right there. And I learned all these tunes, but they were almost like learning a classical piece. It's like when I learned Red Haired Boy, I had to play it exactly, and it was all eighth notes, and it was all exactly the same order, and there wasn't any place to breathe. There wasn't any place to stop. And if you lost your place, you were sunk. So it took a while. When I would first learn how to do fiddle tunes like that, I would learn them. So I would even try to learn them from fiddle players. I got into this thing of trying to learn note for note, play it note for note exactly what they were playing and doing that. And then after a while, I started missing the banjo-y stuff, So then it became more of a challenge to figure out how to play the melody note for note that the fiddle would do, but then dial it back a little bit and start putting some pull-offs back into it, because that's what makes the banjo sound like the banjo.
Yeah.
That's the sound that drove us all nuts, So on
rolly stuff.
The rolly stuff, And so this tune lent itself to it, and it's an upbeat, it's got this. And it's got a couple little triplet trills in it, and it's got a few things in it where playing it melodic style, the melody does the same thing. It does this da 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 da. you know,
reharmonization.
Yeah, so the chords change under it, and I tried to figure out where the best ways to play those were, and sometimes, you know, I could find a way to do it sort of melodic or maybe single string style, but in this case, like that one, playing it as a pull-off just made it a little more, gave it a little more guts. And, you know, moving back down there into that pull-off. So it was a great way of being able to take the melody that the fiddle played, but then try to remember, throw some banjo licks into it. You know, get the big fourth string slide in there when you can, you know, and do those kinds of things. So that's the first song. The other...
real quick.
Yeah.
Maybe my eyes and ears aren't processing as quickly as possible, but... was there a brief moment there where you were playing two of the same pitch right in a row, but playing it once on the first string and once on the fifth string?
Yeah, there sure was.
That's a cool little trick.
And that's a thing that actually came from the fiddle too, because I think when she played it, it was da 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 da, and she played it as like a down and then an upstroke. That's the note. So it's da 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 da. And so yeah, instead of playing that on the same fret, I played the first string 10th fret and then the fifth string 10th fret.
Yeah.
And then move it back into a melodic style thing, and that gave you the same. And once again, that's very fiddly because Sally Gooden. You play that fifth string and then your second string 8th fret all the time, and those notes are the same note. So yeah, that was a part of it that you know, I had to figure out where the best place to find that. And ironically, when we did the CD release party, I had I'm just getting over this. In fact, just a week before, I had smashed my left hand thumb in a car door.
Oh no!
And so I lost about half of the thumbnail and had it wrapped up with a big bandage and everything. And I finally got to the point where I could still play the banjo and I could hold my thumb behind the neck, but I couldn't use it to play.
The wraparound
to wrap around and do that. So on the album release night when we played it at the Station Inn, I had to actually modify the way I played that song, and I did play both notes on the first string, and I played it all single string just to be able to get the melody out. So that works too.
But on a broader perspective, like, is that a device that you use a lot? Or did it just kind of pop in for this one? You know, I remember using it one time before, really specifically on another tune that was a band that I played in back in the 80s and 90s, Paul Adkins and the Borderline Band. Ron Pennington wrote a tune that he named after his grandfather, whose name was Verdell Williams, and he was from Scott County, Arkansas, and he wrote the tune and he called it Verdell of Scott. And it was in the key of F, and I can't remember anything about the tune now, but I remember it had a thing like that in it, where it was Ron played it on the mandolin, and it was a double note on one string, like he hit the E string twice or something in a row as a down and upstroke, and I did, or maybe it was even four. It was four, and it was like it was that sort of thing. If my banjo was in tune, it would sound better. It just came from a demonstration with James McKinney, and I was playing so hard. Oh, yeah.
And it had something in it like that, where I had to play the same note 4 times in a row, and that was the way I did it. Yeah, the same kind of thing. I just played first and fifth, just wrapped my thumb around, and you know, did it that way. Yeah,
and depending on how your roll needs to set up, that's a cool trick to.
Well,
you know, I don't know even how to explain it, but
it was also it's the same thing, and I just thought about this because I was just teaching a couple of my students the Earl Scruggs.
Yeah, Home Sweet Home.
So right there.
Yeah.
And if you just listen to those notes, and this once again goes to the perfect reason of why written notation sucks for the banjo, because you've got this note is happening 3 times in a row right there. You can play it here, 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 or here. You know, it's the same note, but how do you actually play that? So it's so you're doing a backward and then a forward roll, and you get this really cool sound on that. You know, just as a quick side note, and I think you'll appreciate this, and maybe everybody else will too. I was teaching a few years ago at a little lesson studio thing in Nashville, and there was a piano teacher there also, and I thought, you know, he was a really good jazz player. In fact, he played with Alison Brown for a little while.
Oh, cool.
This guy. And I thought, you know, I'm really lax on my music theory. I thought I should take a couple lessons from this guy and, you know, maybe get him to teach me some jazz stuff.
Yeah.
And so I asked him about it, and he said, yeah. He said, oh, I'd be happy to do a couple lessons. He said, if you'll give me a couple lessons. I was like, you want to learn banjo? And he said, well, yeah, but I want to learn it on the piano. And so we went in for his first lesson, and he had the Earl Scruggs book, and he was trying to play the notation out of the Scruggs book, which didn't work.
I would love to hear that.
Yeah, it didn't work very well. So he asked me to play something, and I played, I don't know what I played, Foggy Mountain Breakdown, anything, whatever it was that I played. And then as I played it, he kind of listened, and then he looked at me, and then he pointed at the 5th string, and he said, so everything you do, that note just stays the same, right? And I said, right.
Pretty
and
much.
He said, so if you change chords, and I said, yeah, that one just stays. And he said, so you just keep hammering away at that one G note no matter what else is happening. I was like, yeah. And then he started doing it on the piano. He started playing these lines, and the whole time he was doing it, he had one finger just going ding, 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 you know, on that. And then he got so excited. He just had so much fun with that because that was the thing that unlocked it for him is he couldn't figure out what made the banjo sound like the banjo. And he said, so even if you're in the 5 chord, yeah, you've got that odd note sticking out there. And he's like, wow, what a crazy sound. And, you know, it's the thing we all take for granted. It's what makes the banjo sound like the banjo. You know, all these doubled notes and that G just wailing away with whatever key you're in. In fact, in the song Alone on the new record, it's in C minor, so there's a whole section where you're going from E flat to B flat to A flat. And when the A flat chord, I played that, and the first time I played it, I thought, oh, I got to stay away from that note. But then I thought, no, man. It fits perfectly. And when you play that A flat, yeah, of course you have this dissonance right there, but it's the same dissonance that you get when you play Old Home Place. It's just that creepy note for just a second, and then it resolves itself, and that's the magic of the 5-string banjo, and that's what gets us all fired up about it. So I forget where we even were when I started but it was fun.
I'm sure I sidetracked us with something.
But that's and making use of that is the other thing when it comes to playing things in other keys, like the song that's in B flat, which is Jubilee, the title track of the song. I fell into a habit that I do on a lot of like really mellow sounding, you know, this one's got a really sort of nice loping kind of rhythm to it. And I'll play this suspended chord a lot where you kind of drop your 2nd string down I like that sound a lot. I love it too, yeah. And when you're in B flat, you can leave your open D on the bottom of it and get that. You get a really pretty chord that way. And so you can use that in the song, and then there's sort of a hook. There's a line that plays, you know, behind "I need a year of Jubilee." And in that case, it worked out to play it melodic style by playing the open 1st string, you know, this E flat note on the 2nd, and leave that, you know, so that, again, like I was talking about, instead of it coming out, instead of having any of those licks in this song, there's not a single one. The whole song has this, I need a year of Jubilee. I can't sing it, but da 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 da. You know, and you can use that as a B flat chord, and it just sounds really pretty, and it gives you a tone that you're not using, voicing on the banjo that you're not always used to, and it just gave it I thought the right sound for the song.
Yeah, it's perfect for those songs, and I assume you would maybe agree that maybe the reason you can really get away with doing this whole no capo trick is, correct me if I'm wrong, but none of these songs on the album are like bluegrass burners where you need to play Rollin' My Sweet Baby's Arms in A flat or something.
Exactly. And that's in defense of the capo. That's what I always tell people too, is that if you are going to play Rollin' My Sweet Baby's Arms and it's going to be in B, if you tried hard enough, you could do it in an open position or play it all in closed positions, but it won't sound like... And that's what we want the banjo to sound. That's what I want the banjo to sound like,
At least for that song, yeah.
I used to make fun of Ryan Cavanaugh whenever we would get together and jam, and he would do these blistering things in single string style, and he would just, he's a mind-numbing banjo player anyway. I mean, this stuff that he knows how to do. And I remember a few times he would be over at the house and we'd jam and do a few things, and then he would be into the middle of some incredible solo, and I would just reach up to his fifth string and just start untuning it, and it wouldn't make any difference to what he was playing, and I would say, dude, why aren't you just playing a plectrum banjo? And of course, in his defense, of course, he is a great bluegrass banjo player too, but it did make me think. I thought, well, you can get all involved in doing those kinds of things, but it's the rolling sound. It's that open string sound that really is what gets us excited about the banjo. Yeah. That's banjo picking.
100%. And we should all be making fun of Ryan Cavanaugh. How dare he do those things that makes us feel so inferior.
That's right.
And now a word from our sponsors, but we will be right back with the episode in just a few moments. The Picky Fingers podcast is thrilled to be sponsored by Peghead Nation, the top site for instructional video courses in banjo, guitar, mandolin, fiddle, dobro, upright bass, and ukulele. You're going to learn bluegrass, old time, and other styles from some of the most talented players and instructors in all of roots music. Go to pegheadnation.com to see their great lineup of courses. Here are some of the choices just for banjo. Beginning banjo and bluegrass banjo with Bill Evans, clawhammer banjo with Evie Layden, Wade Ward-style banjo with Bruce Molsky, the banjo according to Danny Barnes, and contemporary bluegrass banjo with Wes Corbett. All of these courses include high-quality multi-angle video lessons, downloadable notation and tablature, play-along tracks, and plenty of tunes and songs to play. The best part is that just for being a Picky Fingers podcast listener, you are going to get your first month free. So head over to pegheadnation.com and use the promo code PickyFingers at checkout. That's pegheadnation.com and PickyFingers, all one word, all lowercase, at checkout. I'm so proud to welcome a new sponsor to the podcast. That's Page Capos. Page has been family-owned right here in my home state of Michigan since Brian and Ralph Page started the business way back in 1988. Since then, Page has become known for its high-quality capos for all the instruments, and folks, they have 3 different lines of capos, so whether you are just figuring out how these things work, right on up to if you are a demanding studio or stage professional, Page has a product for you. And just when you thought there couldn't possibly be anything new in the capo design world, they are proving that wrong with their new Page Pro series. I can tell you firsthand that the innovative patented design on these new Page Pro capos is second to none in both the tone quality, it sounds like you're not playing with a capo at all, and also the tuning stability. It's pretty amazing and you owe it to yourself to check them out. So head over to pagecapo.com. That's P-A-I-G-E capo.com. The Picky Fingers podcast is also sponsored by Elderly Instruments. I have been so lucky to have Elderly Instruments as my local family-owned music store for as long as I can remember. But they are more than just that. They are the world's most trusted source for new, used, and vintage fretted instruments, which means They're the first place you should check for any of your banjo, mandolin, guitar, ukulele needs, instructional materials, and all the accessories to go with it. And the other part is that Elderly is just as well known for their excellent customer service as for their amazing selection of products. So head over to elderly.com to see their full inventory or give them a call to talk to one of their helpful and professional sales representatives. That's 517-372-7880. And last but not least, we have another family-owned business in Sullivan Banjos supporting the Picky Fingers Banjo podcast. A lot of you know that I have been playing my Sullivan Banjo for about 20 years now, and I'm here to tell you that it is sounding better than ever. Now, fortunately for you, Eric is still maintaining that high Sullivan quality, and he is ready, willing, and able to build you the banjo of your dreams, whether you just want a tried and true traditional design on up through your wildest custom dream banjo. Eric is here to build it for you. Head on over to sullivanbanjo.com, email sullivanbanjo@gmail.com, or just go the old-fashioned way. Call up Eric Sullivan at 502-365-5022. Get that legendary Sullivan tone with that added personal touch of being able to design your banjo with the person who's actually building it for you.
You know, I do have to tell you about a thing. I thought about this again. I was lucky enough to get to attend Tony Trishka's birthday party earlier this year in New York, and get to hang out with all the guys that were up there. And just talking about the leading edge of banjo, you know, Bela Fleck was there, of course, and Noam Pikelny. And Noam was working on this thing that the whole time he was backstage, he just kept playing this thing. It was really complicated, you know, way over my head. And I watched him do it, and he just kept working on it because, you know, that's why he's Noam Pikelny. That's why he can do that, because he just continually works on getting it right. And finally, he sat down with Bela and he said, "Hey, let me ask you something. How would you finger this part of this thing?" And then he played this really complicated thing, and Bela looked at it and he said, "Play it again," and he played it again. And then Bela played it, and then Bela said, "Well, you could try this, or you could do this, or have you tried getting this note this way?" And they went through it, and he said, "Well, no, I think what you've done is you really got it." And I just watched it and I thought, you know, oh God, please don't ask me. and I just thought, the monkey sitting in the chair over here, I can't, you know. Yeah. And I thought about two different things when that happened, and I think about this a lot because I remember as a student of the banjo, and I'm thinking about it too, especially here at like Banjo Camp. You know, we're at Banjo Camp, so there are some guys here that have been at it for a long time, and there are some players here that are still figuring out how to make a 3-finger C chord. You know, it's that still thing. And I remember being at that level, and there was no difference between my teacher and Bela Fleck. You know, they knew everything. I knew nothing. Uh-huh. You know, it wasn't until later that I got a few more rungs up the ladder that I realized, oh, okay, there are players that are, you know this, and there are players that maybe know that. But keeping that in mind, you know, it also made me think when I was watching Bela and Noam do this thing that was so incredibly, you know, past, you know, my ability level. I watched him do it, and I thought, well, I could either feel really bad about, you know, I could never be able to reach up to that, or I can just be happy that I'm in the room. You know, I thought I'm in the room watching the two guys on the planet that could possibly do this, you know, do it. And I'm probably overselling it because Nikolai Margolis was there, and he could probably do it too. Yeah. But it you know, then it also brought it back to me that when you talk to Bela and you ask, you know, who's the biggest inspiration on the banjo, he still points at Earl. You know, he still looks at Earl, and we all still look at like J.D. Crowe and think, how did he do it? You know, how did he do it? How did he get this thing? And boy, there's so much music to come out of the banjo, and then I hear Alan Mundy play, and you know, some of the things that you know, completely different planet from where Noam and Bela were over there. But here's Alan Mundy playing this unbelievably beautiful thing on the banjo with these chords that I didn't even know existed, you know, and you just think, I'll find my little piece of the banjo my little corner in the banjo world and just try to make the best music I can make, and I guess one of the things that I found comfort, I found solace, I found a home in is if you're, and I feel lucky about this, that I have a steady musical situation. So I am the banjo player in Becky's band. So that's the identity. That's my main gig right there.
Yeah.
So I don't think I need to study Django solos because that's not required of my job. Right. I don't have to figure out how to play Brazilian choro music because that's not part of my job either. But I do have to figure out how to play Becky's music and make it authentic to her, but bring what I have into it. And so instead of challenging myself to keep up with anybody else, all I have to do is do the best job I can do with this and create something, and even if it's not, even if I don't have all the technique that somebody else might, or even if I don't have the same bag of tricks or the same vocabulary as another player might have, I do have what I have, and I do have my mind, and I can come up with hopefully something that adds to it and puts my stamp on it. And like I always used to say, even going back to the rock guitar players, you think about a player like Steve Vai, who can do anything, who seemingly can play unbelievable things with one hand on the guitar. But Stevie Ray Vaughan could make you cry with like 4 notes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, almost to your point, if I'm remembering right, didn't you get the gig with Becky because she needed to find somebody who could comp like Scott Vestal and Ron Block or something like that, and do both of those?
That was true, yeah, because her solo album that sort of launched her into her own band was called Tween Earth and Sky, and I played on one song on that record. But she also had, Scott Vestal played on it, and Ron Block played on it, and who else? That might have been it for Banjo, but there were a lot of other special guests. Yeah. And so, there were songs that she had that needed sort of the Vestal-y, touch, and then there were songs that really needed the Ron Block slam, And I remember at the time I was playing with Chris Jones also, and so I was only on borrowed time with Becky, and she kept asking me, one of these days I have to replace you. Who can you help me find that can do that? And I remember going through it and thinking, well, how many players do I know that would be, that could play both styles or would be happy doing both styles? And it eventually occurred to me that was me.
Yeah. Exactly.
So the rest of the record, like I said, the big terrifying one, and probably the other most bluegrassy one is the song Alone, which is in C minor, which again is a key that you're not used to really playing in on the banjo. Jam section goes between C minor and F, And you just try to find. To me, I'm still a position-oriented player. I know some people look at the neck as a series of scales. I look at it as chord shapes. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. It's just another name for it, really. Yeah. And so I'll try to find that. The challenge with it was, of course, to try to do it and and not hit the major third is, where I always wanted to.
Right.
But also to try to keep a rolling sort of sound, even though there's a fair amount of single string stuff that happens in there, but trying to find something jammy in the tonality of C minor was it took a few days of just sitting and thinking about just playing over a C minor chord to just remember where those positions were, just because it's sort of unfamiliar. You can kind of think of C minor as E flat major, of course, too.
Yeah.
And find those same positions. But again, it's just, fortunately, like you said before, it's not like I had to try to play Rolling My Sweet Baby's Arms. It wasn't like I had to really try to just, reach in and play real bluegrass style over that. And then, the one or two of the other tunes. Again, the other ones are the tunes that were in A, mostly sort of land on the D chord. And because of that also felt really good to play without a capo, because it was this you could roll off of that fourth string a lot for the stuff that was in D. And that's one of my other tricks that I'd like to think about when it comes to playing stuff in keys that aren't G on the banjo is, like we talked about the fifth string being the drone. Mm-hmm. If you're playing in the key of D, if you don't want to use your fifth string as the drone, you can use your fourth string as the drone. And all of that, never used the fifth string at all, still sounded very banjo-y, sounded different, but if and of course in this case we're using the low string as a drone instead of the high string as a drone, but just having that drone string in there makes it sound banjo-y. It fools your ear into thinking, oh yeah, it does sound like a banjo. It still sounds like rolling. Noise, yeah. And being able to use those kind of tricks, if you're playing in the key of E, to remember that your second string can be your drone. That one works pretty well, You can also, if you're playing in the key of D, you can play using the inside strings and use your first string as the drone. And trying to find different positions that fit those sort of things. That's my approach to
that's a cool way of thinking about it. I don't think I ever thought about that for E before, for using the B as like a drone string.
I think I stole that from Tony Trischka. He did that song. He did a song in the key of B. He capoed his fifth string when he did it. It was called Purchase Grover.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And he did that. So there's a couple songs where I use that same trick, playing over B. We do stuff in Becky's band. We do a song in C sharp that again is like, there's no place to capo for C sharp, because even if you capo to the first fret, all of your inlays are in the wrong place when you're in C sharp. So it just doesn't do any good. So
you play out of C sharp?
I just play it in C sharp, yeah. And but there was precedent, because Chris Jones used to do a song in C sharp also. They're weird. Songwriters are weird.
I know. Why don't they ever think about us?
Yeah.
So it sounds like that C minor tune was probably the heaviest lift in terms of this non-capo approach that you committed to?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because it's the storm before the calm. It's the real tension piece of the record before the final tune is in C major, and it's a 6/8, Irish, you kind of sort of feel to it, and it's the uplifting tune. It's the being redeemed in the belly of a whale.
The most of this blessed second chance, telling telling anyone who listened my big fish tale. About that time I was rescued in the belly of a whale, where redemption came to find me in the belly of a whale. How I was resurrected.
It was just trying to make the song before it as tense and as dark as possible, you know, and have the foreboding, you know, that would be the storm. And then, of course, the resurrection at the end of it, you know, being in the happy sounding C major tune. So just adding all those major thirds just made everything better.
Yeah, that's really cool. And is it number one on Billboard?
It debuted at number one, which was, again, nuts. None of us saw that coming. You know, it's one of those things where a lot of that has to do with luck, because you never know what was going to be number one. For the past several weeks before that was the Bela Fleck Chick Corea record.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, we can argue whether that should be on the bluegrass charts or not, but, you know, it's...
There it was, yeah.
But if that's what you're up against, then, you know, Bela Fleck sells a lot of records. You know, he's a popular musician. So it's just that we managed to sneak in on a week when nobody bought his record. Sorry, Bela. but no, it was a thrill for all of us, because again, I know it's really gratifying for Becky, because she did sort of go out and bear it all for this record, you know, really bared her soul for it. And to know that it's connected with people in a way that they really want to support it and really feel what she was saying in there, that's just really gratifying for all of us. We're really tickled and thankful that people are liking the music.
Yeah, absolutely. I dig it too. And I guess before we leave that topic, what was the banjo you used on the recording?
On the recording, I used my old Flathead number 7, my 1937 RB7, TB7. I don't know what mics it was, but I know there was one ribbon mic and there was one vintage Neumann that I know Dave Cinco was...
Cinco stuff.
Yeah, he went... When we were packing up the studio at the end, somebody was trying to help him put the microphones away, and he was like, "No, I will put the microphones away." You know, he's got some vintage stuff that I think is one of a kind at this point. So,
well, especially those ribbons, they say if you even just move them too quickly, don't breathe, but even, you know, running with them or something that creates enough wind,
brings up the Nigel Tufnell, and, you know, don't even look at it. You can't even don't even look at this guitar.
You hear the sustain?
You hear the sustain?
Hey folks, Keith here with just one more reminder that if you do enjoy what you're hearing from the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter by going over to patreon.com/banjopodcast. Just a few dollars per month really does help keep this show going, and you do get excellent prizes in return. So I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine, and we'll keep these banjo episodes coming for a long, long time in the future. One more time, that's patreon.com/banjopodcast. The last time we did an interview, it hadn't happened yet, but when it came out, you had just won the IBMA Banjo Player of the Year.
Oh, yeah, so I can put a date on it. It was 18 then. It was 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this time we're doing this interview and you're about to be inducted into the Banjo Museum Hall of Fame. Is that right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
So I guess what I'm getting at is, like, I feel like I deserve some credit here.
Well, thank you. Yes, yeah, I think so. Yeah, certainly. And when shall we schedule the next interview? Exactly. Yeah, no, that was so crazy. So my first trip to the Banjo Museum was a few years ago when Janet Davis was inducted into the hall, and Johnny Beyer, the director of the museum, called me and asked if I would. I think maybe Janet had suggested that if somebody were to do the induction for her, that it might be me, because Janet and I were friends. I used to work at her music store for a little while, and I was really tickled to be able to do that. And then I got to go out, and so if anybody hasn't visited the Banjo Museum is amazing. The Banjo Museum really is an amazing, magical place. Yeah. It's in Oklahoma City. It's not like you're just driving through Oklahoma City, I know, but if you should be driving through Oklahoma City, man, do yourself a favor. Even if you're only marginally interested in banjos, just the artistry of the banjos that they have on display there is just breathtaking, and it's a really well put together museum. And so I really had a great time when I was out there and getting to meet all the people and hang out. And I really had no idea that this was coming. And I got a phone call from Johnny saying, or he left me a voicemail somewhere, and he said, "Hey, please call me back. I'd been trying to email you, and somehow I missed the emails." Mm-hmm. And he said, "Well, the reason I was calling is you're being inducted into the hall." And it took me a minute for that to register. I was like, "Wait a minute, you've inducted who? And you want me to come out and
do the thing again?
For them or something, you know?" And then I was like, "Wait a minute, you mean me?" And no, that's it's crazy. I mean, and the class that I'm going in with is me and Kristen Scott Benson, who
okay.
I mean, yeah, right, yeah, and Bill Evans. So, it's like I get to go have this honor, but I get to hang out with my pals and do it.
That's a crew. When does that happen?
That will be October 12th is the date for it. So follow me on Facebook, and you will see lots of pictures.
Oh yeah, that's incredible.
Have you ever been to the museum? Have you gotten to go?
I'm like sitting here in shame to admit it. But
I mean, I know Oklahoma City's a little out of the way, but it is definitely worth it. It is an amazing thing to see. They have some absolutely terrific stuff. They have a Kermit. They have Kermit the Frog is there in the museum. A real, it's like saying a real Santa Claus. A real Kermit is hanging out there at the Banjo Museum, and lots of cool old. They have some triangular banjos that I remember asking. I was like, well, okay, they made a triangular banjo head, and I think they were made for I was one of the civic organizations. I can't remember because it mimics their logo. And they said, yes, they made these banjos for them. And I said, well, how do they sound? And they said, terrible.
Yeah. Those are the ones that should be behind the plexiglass.
Yes, but they're marvelous to look at.
They have synthetic heads? Like stretcher bands and stuff, or is this like a?
Yeah, no, I think they had calfskin heads on them, and they're sort of they're not direct triangles, but they're triangular, shape. They have corners. They definitely come to points. Very weird, very weird. And then they have the banjo bass. They have the Gibson banjo bass that you see in those advertisements. Yeah. Apparently, Gibson only made one. That's the old. They made that one and got over it.
Came to their senses.
Yeah, they built it. And they were like, well, nobody bought this one. So.
Probably because it didn't have 5 strings.
I know. I know. Just put one more. That's it. Yeah, it's an honor and a thrill. I'm looking forward to being out there, and it's just I have to update my resume. I guess it's
the CV.
Yeah, I need to ask Becky for a raise. Hey, Becky.
Hey, that's as good an argument as any.
Yep,
that's cool. Well, congrats! I'm really happy for you, and it's well deserved. And I know a lot of people listening are cheering for you as well.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
What music theory did you learn from the piano player? I
Nothing.
meant to ask.
I didn't learn a thing. I just got so involved in watching him play the 5th string note on the piano that I don't even remember if we ever got around to my lesson. That was so much fun just doing that, I don't remember. He sat me at the piano keyboard and we did something. Yeah. And it is weird because any of the theory that I've learned, I took some banjo lessons when I started, but they were just, here's how you play Foggy Mountain Breakdown, here's how you do the slide lick, it was that kind of thing. And it wasn't until I started teaching that I started discovering or being able to explain the theory that I already knew. I knew certain things happened, like I knew what made the difference between a major and a minor chord, but I didn't know which step of the scale that third note was. I didn't know that. I just knew how to do the things and make the sound.
You moved your finger to this shape instead, and it
right,
works.
yeah. And then I didn't know how to harmonize a major scale, but I knew that if you played an A major right after that it didn't sound right, and I didn't know why the A minor sounded better, and so it wasn't until I started, it wasn't until I started teaching banjo that I found out that, because other people would ask me those questions, or I would start to explain something and I would think, well, I'm trying to explain something I don't really understand, and then it would make me sort of research that and figure it out. And I really think that that's one of the things being a teacher, because I started teaching fairly early on, maybe not as early as Alan Mundy. He told me he'd only been playing a couple days when he gave his first banjo lesson to somebody.
Somehow I believe that, and I also believe that he was probably fairly good at it.
And he was probably already pretty good, yeah. But I remember as a kid taken karate lessons for, and again, this was only probably a couple of weeks that it even lasted in the class, but I do remember the teacher told us, he said, look, you're learning how to do these stands and, these sort of things. He said, if you want to teach any of this stuff to your friends, go ahead and do it. He said, but just make sure that you're showing them right. Here's how you hold this position. Here's how you do this thing. And I remember thinking later when I started teaching banjo, I thought, well, if I have to teach somebody how to play this lick, well, I better know how to do it correctly, because I know what it's supposed to sound like and I know what I want them to make it sound like. So I have to be able to make it sound right. Yeah. And so I think teaching somebody else how to do something is a pretty good way of improving your own playing, And so
you think your karate teacher had this 4D chess thing of maybe the best way to teach you is to have you teach somebody else.
I kind of do. I do.
That's brilliant.
I think that was something I think that was his point in doing that, was to make sure that if you were going to show it to somebody that you knew what it was. Uh-huh. And I've always taken that approach on banjo. And so, again, when it came time to, and I'm sort of thrown into teaching because my original teacher left the music store where he'd been, and they just,
Bob?
It was Bob Tice.
Yeah.
Yep. And they just needed somebody to take over. And I said, well, look, I'm 16 years old. I've only been playing 2 years. And they said, you were his best student. You're the best. You're all we got. Do you want to come in and do it? And I thought, all right. I mean, I felt kind of honor bound to do it because, there was somebody there when I wanted lessons. So I thought everybody else deserves that. Yeah. But it did make me think, it was like, well, there's some responsibility here too, that I don't want to teach anything wrong.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I kind of know what I'm talking about, or if I don't know, I want to be able to put it together. So yeah, I came to theory backwards, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, I still think it's better to be able to just hear and play music than to know what you're doing.
Yeah. It makes communicating easier.
Yeah.
When you have to either teach or communicate with other musicians and tell them what you're doing, it's it's a language element.
It does help that. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Anything else we should discuss in terms of what has been happening in the world of Ned? Anything you're working on that's particularly interesting, or?
I probably will record some more songs before too terribly long, but right now it's all still just trying to focus on the band and keep that going. I think Nedsky and Mojo might have some new songs coming out before too long.
All right, great.
When we can find time to do it, we still try to play together. So yeah. Mostly just that, and talking on the radio on Sunday afternoons, which is the other one, that people tune in for the More Banjo Sunday, and I keep doing the Sunday banjo lesson. I've repeated myself I don't know how many times now, but so for anybody that doesn't know, I'm one of the DJs on Bluegrass Junction on Sirius XM, and sometime several years ago, I don't even know how long it's been now, I started playing the banjo on my Sunday show and doing a thing called the Sunday Banjo Lesson, where I just explain a little bit about banjo playing, and it's not meant to be real deep. It's just meant to be for anybody that doesn't know. It's like, hey, the fifth string always makes this sound, when you play. But everywhere I'll go, people tell me, oh, I listen to that all the time, even though I don't play banjo. I've had more than a few people come up and tell me they started playing because I made it sound so easy on the radio, which is sort of amazing to think that you have that kind of influence on anybody. But it's also, every once in a while, a thing comes through where a student will ask me a question in a regular banjo lesson, and we'll start working on a particular thing, like, are your slides supposed to be simultaneous with the next note, or does this pull off happen like this? And that'll spark an idea, and I'll do it on the Sunday banjo lesson, and I'll get off at a bluegrass festival somewhere halfway across the country, and somebody will come up and say, hey, that thing you said on the radio made all the difference. In fact, I had that happen. There was a guy back in Nashville who I met who was a utility sideband, in like country bands. And so he plays steel guitar and fiddle and mandolin and dobro, and he was having to play banjo on a couple of songs, but he didn't know much about banjo. He just got one and was like, well, I just got to be able to
just make banjo sounds,
make banjo noises. And so we got to talking. We only met at this party. It wasn't even at a music event. It was at somebody's birthday party that we both happened to know. And one of the things I got to thinking about was, I remember when I wrote the instruction book that I wrote that you want to play, if you're playing this slide, I always like to play it simultaneous, where I play this note and then pick and slide the next note at the same time. Same with this one. And instead of going, that always sounds wrong. The editor of my book was a classical guitarist, and he said, are you sure that that's supposed to be simultaneous, or should be the slide first and the next note? I said, no, it's simultaneous. He said, that's a very advanced concept. That's something that in guitar we wouldn't do for a really long time. And I was like, dude, on banjo, that's day two. We're doing that right away. And so I mentioned that on the radio show. I said, so here's my lesson that week was, here's banjo for people that don't regularly play banjo. Here's some tips to make you sound more authentic. And I mentioned how the slide should be simultaneous with those other notes, and do that. And that guy emailed me the next week and said, I heard you do that on the radio. I know you directed that exactly at me. That has made all the difference in the world. Which I really, again, it was just, to me, it was just like a spark of an idea. He just, he said, I'm having a tough time making my banjo playing sound like banjo playing. And I understood, it's not like he has time to learn how to really be Earl Scruggs. Yeah. And that's not his job. His job is to, quickly grab the banjo and make that sound on whatever country song this is. But I thought, well, I could give the guy at least a leg up to make him sound a little more like a real banjo player. And he said that little tip is what made all the difference to him. And I thought, man, isn't that cool that you can just take a little thing like that.
Yeah, you never know what's going to tie it together for someone or hit them in exactly the right time when they were thinking about it in the right way. I'm actually like confused. You always do the slides that way? Always?
I think so. Instead of... Now, pull-offs, I hear going slightly ahead.
Yeah.
Those always are more like a triplet, or... But that, or even if I go to slide, just like this one. That one may be just a slight bit ahead. I don't know. I think. But, this like... As opposed to... I like to hear this note. I think that slide gives you a little more... it's got that...
What about a hammer-on? Like if you do a low D walk up to the...
I mean, to me, they're simultaneous. Yeah, that's what I like to hear those play them that way. Your mileage may vary.
Yeah, I'm actually I'm speechless because I'm not even sure which way I do it.
I
might do it the wrong way. Dang it.
Well, it comes from hearing so many beginning players actually create an extra note by going...
Oh, right.
You know, like they're going to play Cripple Creek in 5 or something.
Yeah, like
9/8
or something.
Yeah, they're adding an extra note to it, and I'll always tell them, no, you want to get that. You kind of I pick this note and then pick the next note and slide the finger at the same time. Same thing with that one. Yeah. To be able to do them both is actually kind of a trick.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, the fast slide, no, that's not the way.
Right. I can hear it with the fast slide, but your Foggy Mountain thing, I think I might prefer it not simultaneous.
Well, Earl kind of went, he kind of he did the first one without a follow-up note, on the first time. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways. And, the other part of it is, this was another one that was a big lesson for me to learn on banjo was, I used to think about how if we all just tried to play like Earl Scruggs, what would be the difference between any of us? We would all just be Earl clones and we'd be out there, preaching the gospel of Earl. But even if we all try to be Earl Scruggs clones, we're not going to do it. We're not going to sound exactly like him because we're all different people and our hands are shaped different ways and our brains are different. And so it's been fun. I've got a couple of students right now that I've been making do this very thing where I had one and I had her learn how to play a song, and I said, I want you to play this, whatever it was, Molly and Ten Brooks, just like Earl Scruggs played it, and I said, even if you're not exactly note for note, I want you to play it as though you were Earl Scruggs. I want you to try to mimic the sound of Earl Scruggs as best you can, and then work on that for a while, and then came back and said, now let's play the same song and learn J.D. Crowe, do it the way J.D. Crowe played it and do that. And then after she did that, I said, now tell me the difference. What was different? What happened? What did J.D. do? When it came to this, like that lick when J.D. played it, and she played it back for me and got it right. And I said, what was it? And she said, well, when J.D. plays that lick, it's a little behind. And I was like, yeah,
wow.
It's just, it pulls against the timing. Earl played it nice and even. JD pulls against the timing of it a little bit. And it's like some of those little subtleties, you start to learn those things. They take some study. You got to really be careful to listen to them and get them in your head right. And then even as close as you're going to get to doing it, you're still not going to be exactly on it. And all of us are going to hear something different in it too. Like you're going to hear something different in the way that Earl approached something than what I did. And your brain is going to focus on some aspect of it that might not be the same thing that got to me. And you're going to drill down on that, and I'm going to drill down on this other thing, and we're going to come out sounding different anyway. Yeah, and that's cool. That's
great,
where that's where we all start to develop any kind of style, any sort of thing. But being able to discern those differences, that takes some little bit of study.
Yeah, it's tough for sure. Well, I'm going to go practice my slides.
Let's do
all night.
Yeah, it's getting late, and banjo camp's just getting started. Keith, thanks for having me again, man.
Thank you for making the time. I know it's free time is not really a thing that happens here. It's all just cutting into sleep or practicing or whatever we have to do. So yeah, I appreciate your time as well, and it's always great to see you. And it's going to be a fun weekend.
Here we go.
Thank you so much for listening, folks. That's going to do it for this interview and this episode of the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast. The song clips you heard were all from the new Becky Buller Band album titled Jubilee, with one exception, the tune Verdell of Scott by Paul Adkins. Super duper special thanks to my fellow Ferndalian Eddie Hennessy for being this episode's VIP supporter of the show. you all can head over to patreon.com/banjopodcast to support the show yourselves and receive marvelous rewards in return. Or contact me anytime, pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com. And that's going to do it for me, folks. I'll see you next time. Same banjo channel.